Shavuot Tov, Rabotai, the Mishnah Yomi is continuing in the third parak of Challah, and today we're going to learn Gimel and Dalet. Now, yesterday, and for the Mishnah out for Shabbat, we learned in the first Mishnah in this parak, in parak Gimel, that once you pour the water into the dough, but you have not yet mixed it, well, technically you could take Challah, but it's also not quite there in being chayav in challah because it's not mixed. Now in Mishnah Gimel, we learn an application of this concept. So it reads, Hikdisha isota ad shelo gilgula. If she, it could be he also, but we assume this is a woman making this dough, and she's makdish, she consecrates, gives her dough to the temple, to the Beis HaMikdash, before it's gilgula, before it's fully mixed up. So she might have added some water into this dough, into the flour, but it's not mixed. So then she gave it to the temple, ufdata, and then she bought it back from the temple. She redeemed it from hekdesh, paid the value, and if the one who gave it is buying it back, there's usually a chomesh, an additional 25%, chayevet. So she now has to take challah when she mixes it. Misha gilgila, if she had already mixed it, and then she gave it to the temple, ufdata, and then she redeems it back from the temple, chayeves. She has to separate challah from it. Now the Mishnah brings a third case where she's going to be pater. Let's check this out. Hikdishona, she was makdish the dough, ad shelo gilgula, when it was not yet mixed. The gilgula hagizbar. Now she didn't mix it together. She didn't knead it together into a nice dough. The gizbar, an agent of the temple, usually it's the treasurer or the accountant, someone who works for the temple, did that work while it was in the possession of the temple. And then she buys it back. The original owner buys back the dough. Patura. You don't have to separate challah from such a dough. Why? Shebishat chovata haita patura. At the time the dough became fully chayev, required in hafrashas challah, and separating the challah, that's when it's mixed together, it was patura because it belonged to the temple at that time. Now, we recall the Torah says it's a risotechem, it's your dough, your kneading that you own, that an individual owns, that's chayev in challah. But dough owned by the temple is not chayev in challah. So if it reached that time cutoff, when you mix it up of being chayiv and challah, when it was in the possession of the temple, it's pater from separating challah, even if the original owner later buys it back. Now, Mishnah Dalet starts kayotzebo. Kayotzebo means similar to this. So it's a similar concept. Hamakdish peirotav. Someone sanctifies, gives over to the temple his produce, ad shelo bal onatamashrot, before it becomes chayev and meiser. So it's not yet grown a third, it's not yet ripe enough to be eligible to take meiser, or it's already been harvested, but it's not finished yet. It's not the time when meiser is taken, when you finished it, ufdon, and then he was poda, he bought it back from the treasury, chayavin. Because when they get fully processed or fully ripened, they're back with the original owner, who is not the temple. If he waited until they reached the time of meiser, they were fully ripened or fully processed, ready to separate tithes, and then he gave them to the temple, and then later redeemed them, bought them back, chayav, he does have to separate tithes. Now the Mishnah again brings a variation, in which case he doesn't have to separate, similarly to the challah case. Hikdishan ad shelo nigmaru, he gave it over to the temple, he was makdish to the temple, before it was ready to separate tithes. Gemara na gizbar. Now the gizbar, the treasurer, the agent of the temple, he finished the processing. Ve'achar kach pada, and then the original owner bought it back. Peturin shebishat chovatan hayu peturin. At the time they became required to take the tithes, the time of their gumar malacha, their nigmaru, they were owned by the temple, and they are pater from tithes, even if they're later bought back by the original owner, similar to the case of Challah. Shkoyach Rabosai, Shavuot Tov.